is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Andrew Wilson.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Swedish seismologists say explosions were registered near the Nord Stream pipelines as sabotage isn't ruled out as the cause of 3 leaks.
Early results from voting in Russian-controlled regions of Ukraine show 97% in favour of annexation, according to Russian media reports.
The Bank of England signals further rate rises as UK lenders withdraw some mortgage deals after the collapse of the pound.
And NASA hits the bullseye as its DART mission smashes a spacecraft into an asteroid 11 million kilometres away. Unprecedented damage in a single day. The verdict of the operator of the Nord Stream gas pipeline system, which says its 2 main pipes are leaking into the Baltic Sea.
They allow the flow of gas from Russia to Europe and essential to a continuing row over sanctions after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. European countries say they're investigating the leaks. The Kremlin says no cause has been ruled out, including sabotage. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Peter Oliver, who's in Berlin. So, Peter, this sounds complicated and potentially worrying. What do we know so far?
Well, complicated, worrying, certainly tight-lipped from here in Berlin, where I'm speaking to you from. The authorities saying they don't have very much to say about the causes behind this. But what we do know is that late on Monday evening, a lot of alarms went off around the Nord Stream pipelines and the areas that monitor it, as there was a dramatic loss in pressure in one of the tubes of Nord Stream 2. That's the pipeline that never went into operation. They went searching for what the cause of that loss in pressure was, eventually finding what has turned into a 1 kilometre wide expanse of bubbles coming through up to the surface of the Baltic Sea around the Danish island of Bornholm. The Danish authorities have been the ones really coming out with the announcements of what has been going on. They've said that actually there are 3 ruptures in the Nord Stream pipelines, 1 in Nord Stream 2 and 2 in Nord Stream 1. Those ruptures have all occurred around that Danish island of Bornholm. What we are hearing, though, through what we've heard throughout Tuesday, is the idea of there being 1 of these type of ruptures is incredibly uncommon. The idea of there being 3 in such a small area, well, that's absolutely unprecedented. In fact, those were the words used by the company that operates the Nord Stream pipelines. What we've heard from seismologists, though, from Sweden, is that they detected what they're saying were not natural things that could be construed as explosions occurring in the area around the same time and around the same place as where these ruptures in the Nord Stream pipelines have been detected.
The source of these explosions, as far as we can tell, there's nothing naturally occurring that could explain these. The exact source of them is of course a bit hard for us to speculate about. If these really are explosions, which we find highly likely, then of course they're man-made somehow.
So, Peter, is it just the Europeans who are investigating what's happened?
No, Nord Stream 2 and Nord Stream 1, of course, they are financed, ran, operated in part, in an extreme part, biggest part, by Gazprom, the Russian gas giant. And we have heard from Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesperson, on Tuesday. He said that Moscow is very alarmed by the news that what has occurred in the Baltic Sea, and that Russia wants to see a full investigation into what has gone on. they're not the only ones who want to see an investigation. We've heard from the Danish authorities as well, saying that they've put their energy alert system on the second highest alert that it'll go to. We've also heard from the Polish foreign minister, the Polish deputy foreign minister, I beg your pardon, saying as far as he's concerned, this was definitely a deliberate act.
Today we faced an act of sabotage. We don't yet know all the details of what happened, but we can clearly see that it's an act of sabotage, an act which likely means a further escalation of the situation in Ukraine.
The very concerning events of yesterday, with leaks from Nord Stream 1 and 2, highlights the urgency of increasing our energy security in Europe.
Well, in terms of what happens next, of course, we are still trying to determine what has caused this. The Nord Stream group are saying that they've no idea when they would be able to get round to doing anything regarding to fix the problems. Those pipelines aren't operating anyway in terms of sending gas to Europe right now. In terms of news coming out from the German side, I mentioned they've been incredibly tight-lipped. We have heard that shipping around Bornholm Island will be redirected because of those bubbles of natural gas that are coming up to the surface. In terms of an environmental impact, we're told that there shouldn't be any real impact, but they can't rule anything out at the moment. Of course, investigators looking to see what has caused this, and if it has been caused deliberately, who caused it.
Peter, many thanks. That's our correspondent, Peter Oliver in Berlin.
Russian media is reporting that early results from the widely discredited referendums in East Ukraine show 97% of people are in favour of annexation.
The reports are based on around a quarter of votes having been counted in Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. Britain's defence ministry says President Vladimir Putin could announce the annexation of Ukraine's occupied regions within days. The votes have been dismissed as a sham by Western nations, who've pledged not to recognise the results.
Let's speak to our correspondent, Stuart Smith, live for us in Moscow. Stuart, good to talk to you. This has all moved very fast. The Kremlin's pushed this as quickly as it can, hasn't it?
Yeah, it came out of the blue, and then it was announced that these were going to take place in just 3 days after the announcement. We've now had 5 days of voting, and already the statistics coming from Kherson region, they say they've already counted 100% of the votes, with voting only closed a few hours ago. And they are declaring the lowest figure for the amount of pro-Russian support at 96%. So that's the lowest of all the regions. The other ones reporting above 97%. Kherson, 96%, but of course that is and will be interpreted as a clear majority by the leaders in Kremlin for annexation of these regions. The separatist leaders and Russia-installed officials that are in charge of these regions where Russia has a military presence will be on their way to Moscow, according to reports, either later today or tomorrow to talk to Vladimir Putin. The parliament says tomorrow and Wednesday it will have a meeting to decide the process by which it will go about allowing these regions to join Russia, and then it's expected indeed that a speech will be given by the Russian president in the parliament on Friday, declaring that these regions are now part of Russia, but only, we should add at this point, in the minds of the Kremlin. This is not something recognised under international law, with many of these regions not even fully controlled by Russian forces.
And Stuart, the Russian authorities also struggling a bit with this mobilisation of reservists.
Yeah, that's right, and the Kremlin admitted as such, and even a military commissar was fired on Tuesday for allegedly conscripting the wrong people. It's something that we've seen reports of all over Russia, with those clearly not able to fight, either with medical disabilities, having not had military experience, or having other reasons, or being in professions totally unrelated to what might be valuable in a fighting situation, which is completely unlike what the Russian Ministry of Defense said it wanted, and there was expression frustration expressed by the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov, who said that these mistakes will be rectified. But in the meantime, we're now getting updated figures from the countries that surround Russia by land on the internal situation, with, it seems, over 100,000 Russians crossing, leaving the country since last week. Georgia now saying 53,000, Kazakhstan 98,000, Finland 43,000, and Mongolia 4,000. It's a huge amount of people leaving. Consider many have already left in February. Having said that, the Ministry of Defence clarifying again it will not be shutting the border, but interestingly some regions are. The border with Georgia, the region that borders there, North Ossetia, says it will be closing its region to all traffic from outside the region, meaning that people won't be able to drive to Georgia as they have been doing so. But Kazakhstan seemingly still open, with welcoming comments made by the president there about Russians fleeing what he described as a very concerning situation.
Extraordinary times. Stuart, thanks very much indeed.
Britain's pound sterling has recovered slightly after hitting a record low against the dollar. A controversial tax-cutting package from the government has sent shockwaves through markets.
Lenders have withdrawn some mortgage products after the Bank of England signalled it could raise interest rates once again. The row has given the opposition Labour Party its biggest opinion poll lead in more than 2 decades.
Well, our correspondent Guy Henderson is in West London for us. So, Guy, not much confidence around at the moment. Is there any sign of that changing?
Well, as you mentioned, the pound recovered some of its losses in trading on Tuesday, but there's still a great deal of uncertainty about what could happen next, frankly. I mean, you mentioned that some banks have paused some of their mortgage offering to potential homeowners at the moment, and the reason they're doing that is because they worry that a low pound would make imports more expensive, that would drive up inflation, and that would then force the central bank to act by potentially significantly raising interest rates. The government's position at the moment is essentially to say, don't worry, the announcements we've made so far are not the full package of measures, there is more to come. You can trust us, we will keep a cap on inflation. And so we've heard from, for example, the British Chancellor at a conference of investors here in London on Tuesday, saying he is still confident in the government's long-term growth plan. But it's interesting to note that a senior member of the Bank of England was at that same investment conference, its chief economist, Hugh Pill, and he clearly disagrees with that statement because his view is that the government's fiscal policy, in his words, will require a significant monetary response.
Meanwhile, Guy, the UK's opposition leader has addressed his Labour Party conference today. What did he have to say?
Yeah, I mean, clearly the Labour leader sees this as a moment that should be seized, a rousing speech during the Labour Party conference in which he promised that a now more centrist Labour Party would be able to bring back stability in the UK economy if it were in government through what he called a green prosperity plan that he saw turning the UK into a green growth superpower. He accused the government of losing control of the economy. Let's listen to a snippet of that speech.
What we've seen in the past few days has no precedent. The government has lost control of the British economy. And for what? They've crashed the pound. And for what? Higher interest rates, higher inflation, higher borrowing. And for what? Not for you, not for working people, for tax cuts for the richest 1% in our society. Don't forget, don't forgive.
So strong words from the Labour leader, who is now clearly looking to put the economy at the very centre of the Labour Party's pitch to the electorate. That is the one issue that the governing Conservative Party usually sees as its principal electoral strength. So he's really looking to take on the government head-on here.
OK, Guy Henderson in West London, thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Coming up on Global Business Europe, how will Italy's new far-right government deal with the many issues facing the country's economy?
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and the bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
Welcome back. Just a reminder for you that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
So after the recent falls in the pound sterling to a new record low against the dollar, what about the markets in the US? Let's go to Wall Street and talk to our correspondent, John Terrett. John, good to see you. I gather we're officially in bear market territory. What does that mean exactly?
Yes, we are. What's a bear market, I hear you say? Well, it's 20% down from its recent highs, OK? So the Dow on the 4th of January was 36,799 points. Yesterday, it closed at 29,200, down about 323 points. And so that is, I haven't done the calculation exactly, but that is basically a bear market, 20% off the high. And yesterday was the 5th day in a row that the markets here have been down. But here's the thing. The Dow yesterday was basically 100 points better than it was earlier in the day. And on Friday, when we had an 800-point sell-off, it actually closed down 486 points. And what's happening here is the traders are testing the bottom. They're seeing how far they can go before somebody has to bounce back and buy these stocks because they're so cheap. And in fact, on Friday, there were 1,000 US companies that were testing their 52-week lows. And by the end of the day on Friday, there was only 150 of them. So you can see they keep coming roaring back. And this, I think, is likely to go on. Now, the thing about a bear market is that they come around pretty much every 5 years or so. So investors have to expect it, really. It's part of the cycle. The S&P 500, the broad market here, has been flirting with bear market territory for the best part of the last couple of weeks. But there are other things going on that I think are rattling investors, not least of all Hurricane Ian, by the way, which is about to slam into Florida in the next 24 hours. But we've got bond yields at multi-year highs at the moment. Of course, we've got the pound dollar, this extraordinary event that is going on involving sterling. I mean, $1.03. When I came to America 20 years ago, it was $1.67. And after Brexit, it was $1.43. So, pretty much parity between the pound and the dollar, which is extraordinary. Anyway, basically, the worry here is that higher interest rates, and you saw the Bank of England yesterday saying that they would do what it takes. Higher interest rates will ultimately eat into corporate profits one way or the other, and the markets are worried about a long, deep recession in 2023. Not a little quick recession, but a serious one. That's what they're worried about. So today we had the markets going up, but they've just given up substantial gains. The Dow has just given up 400 points. The Nasdaq's given up 2% this morning. And the reason they were in the green today is because there are signs that some prices are coming down. Oil is the big one, of course. It's $77 a barrel now. It was about 140. I remember talking to Juliette on this program a couple of months ago. So it's well down off its highs. Rent is also coming down. But it's going to depend now, what happens next, on the corporate earnings for the third quarter, which get underway in 2 or 3 weeks' time. If those companies show significant reductions in their earnings, then the markets will react by coming down, which is why you get companies like FedEx 2 Fridays ago saying, everybody, please pay attention. we don't stand by our projections anymore. We've got our business hurting in Asia and Europe now, so things are not going to be as good as you thought. If the companies do that, then Wall Street will probably mark them up a little bit when the earnings come out. If they keep quiet, then they're going to punish them very, very severely. And of course, we have the midterm elections coming up in November, 1 week after the Federal Reserve's next decision on interest rates, which is likely, I think, to be potentially another jumbo 75 points, or maybe potentially a little bit less. Andrew and Robin?
And John, it's getting difficult to follow this one, but we gather that Elon Musk and Twitter might be friends again.
Well, yes. Well, hold on. Hold your horses there, Andrew. We thought so too last night and for the first part of the day here this morning. I don't think they are there, really. There was a rumor that swept the streets saying that there was a deal on the table between Elon Musk and Twitter to sort out this thing where he promised, basically, final offer, he said, to buy Twitter for $44 billion, $54.20 a share. Then he pulled back on that, and they're going to meet in court quite soon. Well, it looks as if that was a false rumor, unfortunately, but Twitter shares went up just based on the rumor. There's another aspect to this as well. Parag Agrawal, who is the Twitter CEO, cancelled the chance to have a deposition yesterday with Musk lawyers. Perfectly normal procedure. This is what lawyers do. They talk to key members of a case coming up, and he cancelled, and that's caused great frustration among the Musk team. Both sides, I think, are arguing over what they call attorney-client privilege. How much of what anybody who is deposed says to the lawyers can actually be used in court. I think that's really the basis of this. And in the meantime, the Court of Chancery in Delaware is preparing to host this case in about 3 weeks' time. October the 17th, it's coming up. It's likely to be virtual. It's going to garner a lot of headlines. Twitter shares up about 1% today, and Tesla shares up around 4%.
John, thanks very much indeed. John Terrett there, back on Wall Street for us.
Economists say rate rises aren't taming inflation in the United States quickly enough. Homeowners are feeling the effects, though, with borrowing rates doubling over the past year. And as Owen Fairclough reports, it's led to a big fall in property sales.
Central bankers aren't renowned for blunt statements, but the current economic climate is changing that.
While higher interest rates, slower growth, and softer labor market conditions will bring down inflation, they will also bring some pain to households and businesses.
And the US Federal Reserve is inflicting pain by raising its benchmark interest rate that was slashed to near zero during the pandemic to more than 3%.
Probably in the housing market have to go through a correction.
In other words, forcing inflated property prices down as part of a wider economic slowdown by making mortgages too expensive for many. At 6.5% interest, the current average 30-year mortgage in the US has nearly doubled this year. That's hundreds of dollars extra in monthly repayments, and the National Association of Realtors is seeing the impact everywhere.
We see rents are rising as well, so for first-time home buyers, for example, it's much more difficult for them to purchase a home. They cannot save for down payment.
For some, these rapidly rising interest rates look familiar.
I think we all face the job of getting the economy on a sustainable, non-inflationary path.
With inflation hitting nearly 15% in 1980, cigar-loving former Fed Chair Paul Volcker deliberately sent the economy into recession by raising that federal funds rate up to a nearly staggering 20%. The average mortgage rate soared to 18.6% in October 1981, while unemployment rose to nearly 11% in the ensuing recession. It was a punishing remedy, but it worked. By late 1982, inflation had dropped more than half, helping the economy recover under President Ronald Reagan. Current Fed Chair Jerome Powell initially hoped to do the opposite to Volcker, gently reducing inflation by gently raising rates so that businesses and consumers would barely notice.
But so far, those aggressive interest rate hikes haven't put much of a dent in inflation, partly because it's so deeply embedded throughout the economy and not just in food and fuel prices. And that's leaving some wondering if Powell may have to push those rates towards Volcker territory in order to pull that inflation out of the wider economy.
But could the housing market, which makes up about a fifth of the US economy, cope with a Volcker-style remedy?
The typical family cannot afford to buy the typical home if mortgage rates are higher than 5.7%. So currently they are higher than that, and what we see, the typical family cannot afford to buy the typical home.
The Fed has signalled more aggressive rate hikes that are likely to top more than 4% by the end of this year, with its ultimate aim of bringing inflation back to a target rate of around 2%. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
The World Bank has slashed its growth forecast for China in 2022.
The bank expects the world's second biggest economy to grow at an annual rate of 2.8%. That's nearly half its previously forecast rate of 5%. The revision is partly due to the impact of China's zero-COVID policy and a property crisis.
Well, despite that, officials within China remain upbeat about the economy, saying they expect positive foreign trade growth in the second half of 2022, despite slowing external demand. CGTN's Zhong Chunying reports now.
Strong resilience and vitality. That's how Vice Commerce Minister Wang Shouwen described China's foreign trade performance over the past few months at a press conference on Tuesday.
Over the past year, the State Council has attached great significance to promoting foreign trade. China's foreign trade in goods jumped 10.1% year-on-year to about $3.95 trillion in the first 8 months of 2022.
But Wang also noted that the growth rate in August was slower than July's 16.6% year-on-year growth. Attributing the drop to the high base last year and a weakening global demand, the official remains optimistic about the outlook of the country's trade growth in the second half of the year, adding that bilateral and multilateral free trade deals such as Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership or RCEP will be practical tools for China to put its foreign trade growth on a firmer footing.
From January to August, the trade volume between China and ASEAN grew 13.3% year-on-year, while trade between China and other RCEP members grew 7.5% compared to 2021. So, despite the challenges caused by global market uncertainties, we're confident that China's trade will achieve a positive growth in the next half of this year.
Officials said more policies will be adopted, such as accelerating the negotiation of free trade agreements with more countries and promoting new trade formats like cross-border e-commerce to further boost China's trade performance and bolster the country's economic growth. Zheng Chunying, CGTN, Beijing.
Bitcoin has broken above $20,000 for the first time in around a week. The world's largest cryptocurrency rallied more than 6%, lifting the broader crypto market. Ethereum also rose 6%. Bitcoin has been trading at between $18,000 to $25,000 since mid-June, when the crash saw nearly $2 trillion wiped off the entire cryptocurrency market.
A Spanish judge has ruled that pop superstar Shakira should face trial in Spain on charges of tax fraud. The Colombian singer is accused of failing to pay over $14 million of tax on income she earned between 2012 and 2014. She's denied wrongdoing and claims she didn't live in Spain at the time.
Apple is moving its iPhone production to India, a significant step by the tech giant away from China amid mounting geopolitical tensions and strict COVID-19 lockdowns. India is the world's second biggest smartphone market after China. Financial services company JP Morgan estimates Apple will manufacture a quarter of all its products outside of China by 2025, from 5% currently.
TikTok could be fined close to $30 million for failing to protect the privacy of children who use the platform. UK regulators say the video sharing site may have processed the data of under 13-year-olds without parental consent over a 2-year period. TikTok has disputed the allegations.
Britain's new king has a new cipher. King Charles's monogram will appear on government buildings and red mailboxes after the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. The cipher was chosen by the new monarch from a series of designs. It consists of the initials C and R, representing Charles's name, and Rex, the Latin for king.
Right-wing politicians in Italy are trying to reassure Brussels that their success in Sunday's general election won't necessarily threaten European stability.
They performed well in the vote, which was won by Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy party. But that's prompted concern over future social rights and the Italian economy. Our correspondent Hermione Kitson reports.
Amid an apprehensive international response to Italy's change in political direction, some policy experts say the new government can offer the stability needed to address the country's financial challenges.
The fact that now we have a political government and not a technical one, that is a good news. You cannot, let's say, manage the energy for families, the energy for companies, stay in a technical point of view.
As expected, Giorgia Meloni's Brothers of Italy party, alongside her right-wing allies Matteo Salvini and Silvio Berlusconi, received the majority in both houses of parliament. They must now hit the ground running to address sky-high energy costs, rising inflation, record public debt and Italy's €200 billion share of the EU COVID recovery fund.
Meloni is the only party that said that it was against an increase of the public debt. And this should be a very good news for the financial markets.
Far-right figures in Europe were among the first to congratulate Meloni. However, other European neighbours expressed concern about the incoming government's social policies. The French Prime Minister said she would monitor Italy's abortion and human rights. And the EU Commission President has warned Italy of consequences if it veers away from democratic principles.
We are very worried about this new government because during the electoral campaign they sent several messages against the migration flows and against the human rights law.
Meloni has always pledged to support Ukraine, but her right-wing allies have been criticised for their close ties with Russia. Salvini is against Western sanctions, and Berlusconi says Putin was pushed into his so-called special operation. The first sitting of Parliament will be on the 13th of October when the new heads of the lower house and also the Senate will be elected. President Sergio Mattarella will then hold meetings with political parties across the spectrum before he officially appoints Italy's new Prime Minister. As the new government takes shape to mark a new era in Italian politics, Europe and the rest of the world will be watching closely. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Rome.
Well, let's focus on Italy's economy and talk to Angelica Donati, who's president of Ance Giovanni, the Italian Association of Builders. Welcome back to the programme, Angelica. So the economy was a big issue in this campaign. What are the main things that need to be tackled first from a business point of view?
Well, there is plenty to be tackled. As we all know, Italy is in the midst of obtaining the second tranche of its recovery fund monies. We are also in the midst of writing our budget law. We're also in the midst of an energy and price crisis. I'll just give you a data point. In the construction sector since May, costs have gone up on average by 35%. There is a very real, very immediate emergency to be dealt with, or we won't be able to work anymore on any of our ongoing sites, let alone start the recovery fund, the PNRR funded sites. So there's plenty to be tackled, which is why there needs to be a clean continuity between what's been done so far and the projects put in place by the next government in order not to waste any time.
And what steps do you think the new government will have to take in order to revive the Italian economy more broadly?
There's only one answer to this, which is investing on growth. Italy has no choice but to grow. Our public debt is 160% of GDP. The only way we can reduce this is to basically expand the economy. In 2021, the Italian economy grew more than any other in the Eurozone. We grew by 6.5%, and a third of this came through the construction sector. The answer is drive businesses to grow, drive businesses to hire, drive businesses to export. It's the only way.
So growth is key then, but what are businesses worried about when it comes to the country's plan to try and do this?
I think the main worry, or I know the main worry, is that historically our country's governments, which have succeeded each other over the years, have been very poor in planning for the long term. We've had many governments, about one every year and a half. And so we've always reacted to emergencies rather than plan for the long term. We want a long-term plan. We want to invest in our future. We want 10, 50-year plans. We don't want 6-month plans.
And you represent the construction industry. What immediate challenges does the industry that you represent face? What would you like to see being done to tackle those now?
I mean, the main challenge is what I was referring to earlier, which is the energy crisis. If we don't approach this in a constructive and forward-thinking way, so not reacting after the fact, but trying to prevent price increases with an automatic price revision mechanism, our 23,000 ongoing sites will stall, they will stop, and companies will fail. The Construction Industry Association has estimated that this year alone, construction companies have fronted so personally financed 5 billion euros worth of higher costs, and we've not been compensated for it. And of course, it's not a tenable situation. So we want the measures that were put in place for 2022 to be extended for 2023, but we want a system of automatic price revisions to be put in place in the new tender law, which is being passed. Alongside the new budget, we're also putting through a new tender law, a new public procurement law. So there need to be measures in place to help businesses work, to help construction companies work. We are responsible for 50% of all works being done through the PNRR. So 50% of the almost 200 billion euros of funds which are coming to us from the EU are being spent in construction. And if there's no companies left, there won't be any way to deploy these funds.
Angelica Donati from Antri Giovanni, good to get your thoughts today. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Thank you.
You're watching CGTN. Still to come, Japan says goodbye to former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe amid controversy over the cost of his state funeral.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on CGTN.
Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Robin Dwyer and Andrew Wilson. The headlines again. Swedish seismologists say explosions were registered near the Nord Stream pipelines. The sabotage isn't ruled out as the cause of 3 leaks.
Early results from voting in Russian-controlled regions of Ukraine show 97% support for joining the Federation, according to Russian media reports.
And the Bank of England signals further rate rises as UK lenders withdraw some mortgage deals after the collapse of the pound.
New measures in Greece to help with the rising cost of energy have been broadly welcomed by the public.
But businesses say they are being ignored and could be forced to shut down, something analysts say is a trend across European nations. Our correspondent Evangelos Ipsas reports.
It's believed that more than 1 million tourists walk through the street of Metropolios in Athens every week in July and August, while business is still brisk now. You would think that the small businesses that survived COVID would benefit from all the foot traffic, but high energy costs are pushing many of them into debt.
Δυστυχώς, όσο με ρίσκο και αν συνεπάγεται από αυτό,
the current risks are high.
We used to offer discounts a few times a year, but now we're forced to offer discounts all year round. If you check the numbers coming in, you'd think business was booming, but the money isn't enough. I have to use my savings to cover everything, and it's only going to get worse.
Energy prices here in Greece are among the highest in Europe and are expected to increase by another 65%, hitting record levels by winter. And all that as the country is already experiencing the highest inflation rate since the early 90s. The government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis announced a new round of support measures with $5.5 billion in initiatives aimed at supporting Greeks impacted by the ongoing energy crisis. New tax breaks, an increase in pensions and minimum wage, energy allowances, housing, and appliance renewal subsidies are among the measures included. However, some political opponents say the measures don't go far enough, especially when it comes to small and medium-sized businesses.
These measures are just too small to make any significant impact for households and businesses. Energy costs are just too high, 7 to 8 times higher than last year. LNG is close to 15 times higher. The measures and the grants don't go far enough.
In Greece, 8 out of 10 work in small businesses. It's this sector that contributes 60% to the country's GDP. It's also this sector that says it's been neglected when it comes to relief measures. Meanwhile, experts say that it's not only the policies from Athens that are pushing businesses into debt, but those from Brussels as well.
For the past 3 years, there have been no financial incentives for businesses to cut their energy consumption. Whatever you do, you can't keep up with increasing prices. The government hasn't included small businesses in its relief measures. And it's not only Greece. The EU has forgotten to include small businesses. The small business sector is fading away.
Greek businesses were badly impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, with some 300,000 of them pulling down their shutters for good. Although the government says measures for small businesses will be forthcoming, many owners are worried that this may come too late. Evangelos Ipsas for CGTN, Athens.
Hurricane Ian has made landfall in Cuba, damaging houses, cutting off power and downing phone lines as high winds pummel the island. Authorities have set up emergency shelters and moved food and other crops into warehouses. No deaths have been reported so far.
Typhoon Noru is heading for Vietnam after it caused widespread flooding in the Philippines and left at least 8 people dead. Thousands of people living in coastal areas have fled their homes, while airports across Vietnam have closed. The government says around 270,000 military personnel have been placed on standby.
Protesters have clashed with riot police in Iran amid continuing demonstrations over the death of a young woman in police custody. Activists say at least 76 demonstrators have so far been killed by police. However, state media has put the number at 41. The death of Mahsa Amini after her arrest by the morality police has sparked worldwide protests. The United Nations says it's very concerned by the government's response to the unrest.
A state funeral for Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been held amid protests and public anger over the cost of the ceremony.
But nearly 4,000 people, including local and international politicians, as well as dignitaries, attended. Abe, who was Japan's longest-serving Prime Minister, was assassinated in July while out campaigning. From Tokyo, our correspondent Terence Terashima reports.
Shinzo Abe is the second former Prime Minister who was honored with a state funeral, since one was held for former Prime Minister Shigeru Yoshida in 1967. It is said that Yoshida's funeral also spurred debate, as state funerals in Japan have been historically reserved for the emperor. Funerals for former prime ministers have been jointly held by the government and their political party, but Japanese Prime Minister Kishida decided to hold a state funeral for Abe to honor his legacy. This move spurred public anger. Thousands protested across the country, saying the state funeral for Abe did not have legal justification, and his legacy also included a number of political scandals, which are still unanswered.
I think it could have been done more modestly. I think it is too costly.
Everyone knew this kind of commotion was going to be expected. I am wondering if there are other means to hold this funeral.
Kyodo News Agency survey showed 60.8% of respondents opposed the state funeral. Over 20,000 police were mobilized across the country to provide security for 4,300 guests that attended the funeral, including 700 foreign dignitaries, members of the imperial family, and executive government officials. The police were determined to avoid any more incident to save embarrassment. Failures in security measures in July led to the assassination of Shinzo Abe during an election campaign. While Prime Minister Kishida continues to honor Abe's legacy, his approval ratings have plunged recently. Kishida hopes to chart his own path with a series of meetings with foreign dignitaries. Abe's state funeral hopes to provide some sort of closure for the shock that rippled across Japan and the rest of the world as a result of former Prime Minister's assassination. But opposition leaders say they will not stop scrutinizing Prime Minister Fumio Kishida for the justification of the funeral costs, as well as LDP's ties to the controversial Church of Unification. Terence Teshima, CGTN, Tokyo.
The winds of change are blowing through the renewable energy sector.
The future of the onshore and offshore wind industry is now being discussed in the German city of Hamburg.
And as Natalie Carney reports, they'll be addressing some huge issues facing the sector.
Currently, wind energy represents about 7% of the electricity mix around the world, but that is expected to grow significantly as governments worldwide focus on diversifying their energy supplies with renewables. According to the Global Wind Energy Council, the sector is expected to grow 8.5% annually, eventually making up nearly 70% of all renewable power production, with the US and China leading that growth. One of the big players in the Chinese market is SANY, which is best known for building large, heavy machinery. They entered the wind turbine market in 2008 and have since grown to be one of the leading manufacturers in Asia, India, and Africa.
The infrastructure we set in China, that helped us at a top level regarding manufacturing turbine cells. We are also good at producing our own blades, our own generators, so which helped us to control the reliability of components, also help us to control the cost of our, offer to customer eventually.
In addition to multiple in-depth discussions on industry developments and solutions, 1,400 exhibitors from 35 countries are also here to showcase their latest innovative technology and ideas, such as Envisionist from Greece, a company that has produced the Envy bird to detect and deflect birds coming too close to a turbine.
It's important for environmental reasons. In case of any endangered species, even one if it is lost, is a huge problem for the ecosystem. So we are very sensitive environmentally. There are regulations that oblige the wind operators to minimize the bird's fatality, and it's always a case for the operator not to lose the production by having to shut down the entire park.
This is one of the challenges for both onshore and offshore wind farms.
This year, much of the discussions here in Hamburg is surrounding offshore production, which has made up the majority of new wind energy contracts and led experts to believe that offshore wind power will contribute as much as 315 gigawatts to grids internationally over the next decade. In layman's terms, that much energy could power as many as 450 million homes.
Germany is working to capitalize on its northern coast wind potential and has struck a $9 billion deal with Denmark to boost offshore wind power capacity in the Baltic Sea to 3 gigawatts, enough to power some 4.5 million households. Even Germany's robust automotive industry is getting involved, with Mercedes-Benz Group announcing it plans to build a 100-megawatt wind park to power more than 15% of the company's annual power consumption. Wind power has proven an important player in the world's transition to renewable energy, and with Europe's ongoing energy crisis, there is little doubt it will make an even greater presence in our future energy mix. Natalie Carney, CGTN, Hamburg.
Coming up on Global Business Europe. NASA's planetary defense test scores full marks as it smashes a spacecraft into an asteroid 11 million kilometers away.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw. The cleanup operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. NASA has successfully crashed a probe into a distant asteroid in a test of the world's first planetary defense system.
Scientists hope the impact of the DART spacecraft will shift the asteroid's position and could eventually lead to humans being able to knock future potentially devastating objects off course as they head towards Earth.
I spoke to Professor Colin Snodgrass, a member of the DART science team at Edinburgh University, and he told me more about the mission's success.
It's been a spectacular technological success. The spacecraft was traveling really very quickly, and the target was very small, and so hitting it successfully was quite something that we're very happy to see that it worked.
How much time do we actually spend looking out for rogue asteroids that might be a threat to the Earth, and how early do we spot them when we do?
So there are large survey telescopes scanning the sky every night looking for these things. And so we think we know now where all of the really big ones are, the sort of size of that killed all the dinosaurs, the tens of kilometers across. There's only about 4 of those in the orbits that come anywhere near Earth, and we know where all of those are, and none of them are a threat. But we're discovering new ones, kind of the 100-meter size, the size of Dimorphos. We find them all the time. And most of them harmlessly going past us, nowhere too close. And so we're constantly looking out for these things, but have not yet discovered one that we're actually concerned by.
DART, the satellite, it looked pretty small. I mean, presumably a tiny nudge is all that's needed.
Yes, exactly. I mean, if we did ever find one coming towards Earth, the chances are we would have years or decades of warning time before it was actually coming to us. And that means that you only need to give the asteroid a very small nudge to change its course enough to miss if you do this, many years in advance.
So if you get the warning or you see something that looks like down the line it might be problematic, you've got time to actually build your satellite, launch it and send it out to go and make contact with the asteroid. You can start the whole operation from scratch. It's a big window we're talking about.
Yeah, that would be the most likely case. I mean, we find these things all the time, finding, that don't come near Earth, and you plot their orbits and you predict where they're going to go next. And then, the chances are if we ever find one coming towards Earth, we would have many years of warning time to do something about it.
The scientists at NASA were clearly extremely thrilled about the results, even of the impact. I mean, are we right to be excited about this?
Oh, very much so. It's a very exciting mission. I mean, this is something that has been proposed as a way to deal with a a dangerous asteroid for many years. But to actually finally do the experiment, it's incredible to see.
How long before we know if it actually worked?
Well, I mean, it hit, so that the level 1 requirement of it worked is already there. How much it's moved the asteroid by, it will take us a little while to figure out, because this is what we have to measure using observations from telescopes on the ground. And what we expect is a change in the orbital period of the asteroid's moon by a few minutes over a kind of a 12-hour period. And so that will take probably some weeks to get a good answer on, at least.
Moving even further from home now, and scientists have long suspected there was once water, even oceans, on the surface of Mars.
It's been assumed that water dried up with large amounts remaining trapped underground, but new findings published by Chinese scientists show a more complicated picture, as our correspondent Sun Ye reports.
The newly published findings shed new light on the makeup of the Martian utopian Planitia surface, the stretch of land that China's homegrown Mars probe had surveyed starting last summer. The team's scientists, who explained their work in a press briefing, have determined the absence of liquid water within 80 meters below the surface of the area, a discovery that may point to an even more mysterious red planet than previously thought.
就是前人认为火星到了亚马逊纪，也就是说31年以来，基本上
Previously, it was thought that Mars had kept getting drier, continuing to lose water over the last 3 billion years. We found that it may not be that simple. In the later time frame, there have been short intervals of water-based activity. This also explains why our rover's coverage in the south of Utopia Planitia has found so many signs of water.
The team had only used Zhurong rover's data from the first 113 Martian days and first 1,100 meters it traveled.
This
is the first time for any of us to see such a layered structure for Mars underground. I don't think anyone has seen it before us, for the simple reason no one's ever had such high-resolution, 80-meter deep rover radar data.
The Tianwen-1 probe touched down at its pre-selected landing area on May 15, 2021. And with all the data still rolling in, the team says they could unlock more knowledge in the future.
一个就是说80米之下
Our next questions are, is there water in places deeper than 80 meters beneath the Martian surface? If so, how has water affected the climate? Moreover, we can learn more about the Martian surface, the crust, the spectrums in between, as well as their water content.
As of last week, Tianwen-1 Mars probe has completed all of its scientific exploration missions and acquired some 1,500 gigabytes of raw scientific data. Sun Ye, CGTN, Beijing.
The headlines again. Swedish seismologists say explosions were registered near the Nord Stream pipelines. A sabotage isn't ruled out as the cause of 3 leaks.
Early results from voting in Russian-controlled regions of Ukraine show 97% support for joining the federation, according to Russian media reports.
And the Bank of England signals further rate rises as UK lenders withdraw some mortgage deals after the collapse of the pound.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app. And in the UK on Freeview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all the team here in London, goodbye.